Hello, and thank you for being here and tuning in. My name is Monty Peterson. I farm in Valley City, North Dakota, and serve as the chairman of the board of directors for the U.S. Soybean Export Council. Each year, I look forward to attending Commodity Classic. It offers me the opportunity to connect with old friends, meet new ones, and learn from others. Well, things are a bit different this year. We are grateful for technology that allows us to come together and share what we're doing. This truly is the most incredible industry to be a part of. Today, you're going to hear about what USAC is doing to change the paradigm on how buyers value U.S. soy and the role of data and analytics. But first, we have a message from Jason Hafmeister, who serves as USDA's Acting Deputy Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs.
Hey, this is Jason Hafmeister. Thanks for having me to your meeting. I want to talk to you a little bit about trade. And I've got a bunch of slides. I'm going to go through them quickly, but there's really three main points I want you to take away. One, trade is critical to U.S. agriculture. Second, there are a bunch of markets where we see further export potential in, and we're working on getting those open. And third, we want to be part of a broader conversation about what is fair trade, what's the right way to organize the international economy. So, U.S. agriculture and trade. We're surplus producers. We are competitive producers. We can compete in global markets, and we need to stay competitive. So the red bars here show our exports, the blue bars show our imports of various ag products. To me, the takeaway is if we grow it here, we can probably sell it anywhere in the world. If we're not competitive, we're probably not producing it. There are some exceptions, but you can see our imports are mainly complementary products. And but the main bulk of U.S. ag production is competitive in global markets. That shows up in the amount of product we ship overseas. Half or more of our wheat, soybeans, and rice is exported, 70 to 80% of our tree nuts and our cotton, even a quarter of our meats or fruits or certain fruits and vegetables. If that product is not sold overseas, it stays here at home, weighs down on our prices. This makes our farmers less profitable. It means they're going to invest less, they're going to produce less, and rural America suffers. So finding and keeping and growing global markets is a priority. We are the beneficiaries of one of the better stories in human history. In the post-World War II era, even as the world population grew to more than 7 billion, we've seen a decline in the number of people living in poverty. A key part of that has been globalization, that the opening of markets, the increase of international economic activity, investment in productivity has yielded longer lives, healthier lives, higher productivity workers, higher wages, more income, more consumption. People are living longer and eating more. And for competitive producers like the American farmer, that's meant more sales, and we've been beneficiaries. So finding a way to keep that going is going to be a priority for us. There is certainly opportunities in the global marketplace going forward. This is some data pre-COVID, but I think it will still, we're optimistic we'll still hit it. So by the year 2030, we see more than 1.5 billion people added to the global middle class. That's people growing up out of poverty, as well as a growth in total population. These are people who are going to be our customers. So let's talk about our markets. The way I think about it is, first, let's look at our best customers. Our 6 top customers take 60% of our sales for U.S. agriculture. We want to make sure we keep these markets, and we want to grow them where we can. When we lose one, like we saw with the tariff actions by China, we felt the price. The tariffs that China imposed in retaliation to our tariffs, we estimated the loss at $28 billion to U.S. agriculture. President authorized the Secretary of Agriculture to write checks to mitigate those, make purchases. So we know the cost of losing these markets. We want to keep them. We want to grow them. We do pay a lot of attention to the other 40%. Not only is there a lot of money to be made in this long tail, but these are the growth markets of the future. If you look at this chart here, in billions of dollars, the first 6 jump off the page, but next, Vietnam, Taiwan, Philippines, Indonesia, Colombia, Hong Kong, Egypt, Thailand, India. These are markets of potential, growing populations, growing economies, places that we want to increase our sales. So we pay attention both to the big 6, but to the long tail. How do we get into those markets? Well, trade agreements are critical for us. When we do trade agreements, we end up selling more. This chart here shows U.S. agriculture exports. The yellow bar is our exports before a trade agreement. The blue bar is after. And so you can see every time we've done a trade agreement where tariffs come down, other barriers are removed, our economy gets more closely integrated with the other country. Economies grow because trade agreements promote growth. We see more sales. So we're very interested in engaging with other countries and removing barriers through trade agreements. All right, let's talk a little bit about our performance. What this shows is how last year, fiscal year 20, improved or compared to fiscal 19. The biggest mover last year for our agriculture exports was China. You can see that we increased by almost $7 billion our ag exports to China. This is thanks to the lifting of the retaliatory tariffs and our ability to participate in China's growing market. It's a good thing that we didn't have tariffs on us because China is a market we really want to be in. You can see for the rest of the world, actually not such great results. For most places, we actually were down in fiscal 20 compared to fiscal 19. Going forward for fiscal 21, we're optimistic. We see growth across the board. Now, part of that is that higher commodity prices are going to help all of our product be more profitable when we sell it, but we do see continued growth into China, $10 billion increase into China. We're forecasting right now for fiscal 21. So keeping that market open, participating in its growth, critical for our success. Now, there is good news that we are competitive producers competing in a growing market, but we do face competition. What this chart here shows is global imports by everybody except for us. And so these are the foreign markets we want to compete in. It's a growing market. You can see total imports have gone from 500 billion to almost 800 billion over the last decade. But you can see our share has declined, even though we're increasing our production in this country. And we're not eating a heck of a lot more. The rest of the world is also increasing production and increasing exports. So as long as we're competing in a growing market, it's not a real big concern of me to be losing share. But if this turns around and global trade slows down and imports decline globally, we will be faced with a lot of other countries sitting on a lot of production, fighting for a smaller pie. So keeping these markets open and growing is a big priority. All right, let's talk about some of our key markets in particular. I'll probably just focus on China, Japan, and Mexico here, given the time. So this is where we sell soybeans. China jumps off the chart, and you can see how calendar year 2020 was such a good year for us compared to 2019. A lot of that happened in the last quarter when China was out of soybeans and price of soybeans was up. And so we're hoping this carries over into 21. Here's the same chart, but with soybean meal. So you can see some difference here, Mexico, Philippines, some other countries where we are also selling some soybean meal, but China dominates. All right, so what is our market share in China? Again, this is same chart that we showed before, but just shows who our competitors are. Of course, Brazil is the biggest exporter to China, and a lot of that is the same kind of products that we export and produce. So we are in competition with them. In a growing market, we both prosper, but it's still a competitor. All right, agriculture exports to China. Remember when China joined the WTO in 2001? It was about $1 billion market for us. In the last 20 years, it's grown to 27 billion, our top market. You can see how the tariffs in 2018 and 2019 took a bite out of our trade, but last year we bounced back. So we're back on trend. We did have the trade agreement, and getting the tariffs off is really the most important thing. Absent that, we would have real difficulty competing and selling in China. But it was more than just the tariff remission. We got some technical reforms in China that opened the poultry market, $750 million last year. We had opened the beef market in 2017, but in the 2019 agreement, we got hormone ban lifted. We've got the age restriction lifted. So a $100 million market after 2017 grew to 300 million last year, and we hope we can grow it some more. Other products did improve their access as well, and we've also improved our relationship with China, where they're being more responsive when we have technical issues, but there's still big problems in the Chinese market. The ethanol tariff is still significant. We've seen some sales recently, but until that tariff comes down, it's hard to imagine we'll reach our full potential there. We've got anti-dumping duties on U.S. DDGs. We don't think they're fair. That was a $1.6 billion market. We'd like to get back in on there. Their biotech system still needs improvement, and we're still working through how they run their quotas that they established under the WTO, and we had to sue them on. So lots of things still to work on in China. But last year was a good year for us. You can see 2017, pre-trade war, and trade fell in 2018-19, and then 2020, tariffs come off. China's strong demand for livestock products, for protein, and restocking of their grain and oilseeds, and we were able to participate in all that. Here's our exports to China. You can see how dominant soybeans are, half or more of our exports in any individual year. Optimism still exists that we will be able to see continued growth in the Chinese soybean consumption, and that means growth in imports, and that as an exporter, that's big for us. Here's our market share on soybeans. You can see we were bumping around 35, 45%. The tariffs came on in 2018. We fell to 20%. Last year, we crawled back up to 27%. So Brazil is still increasing production faster than us, but hopefully we'll improve our share moving forward. You know, looking at the trade last year, I was really struck. We were following this day to day, that because contracts were not signed for U.S. product in October, November, and December, trade vessels were not loaded for China in January, February, and March. And so we had very few sales actual shipments until we got into the summer and the fall. And so you can see by then the Brazilians were out of the market, and we were able to shoot up our exports. So both higher prices and volumes were driving our sales there. So one of the effects on prices, of course, are important along with volume. And so this chart here tries to show how our prices diverged from the Brazilian prices during the trade war. Usually markets are competitive. We're basically looking at a similar price. But when the tariffs came on in the summer of 2018, the US price fell. That's the blue line, whereas the Brazilian price stayed high. Now, ASF hit China, and I think that reduced total demand for soybeans in China. And so you can see a decline in soybean prices. And there's, of course, a ton of other factors that would affect prices. But we were back in parity with Brazil, with some hiccups through 2019 where they were getting a bit of a premium over us. But now when the tariffs came off in January, we are back again tracking Brazilian prices quite closely. So Japan, a big market for us, one of our top 6 markets. Japan moved forward with the TPP agreement with Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and other countries. We sat it out. That was a big threat to us, particularly for products like beef, pork, and wheat, where our competitors were going to face lower tariffs than our products. The good news is we concluded an interim trade agreement with Japan. It got us about 80% of what TPP did. So, but critical for, again, beef, pork, and wheat, and some of the other products that we sell there. So that's the good news, but there's still unfinished business. We'd like to get full parity with our competitors. We'd like to knock down some of the remaining tariffs and other barriers, but finding the right forum to do that with Japan is going to be a challenge. Do we continue with the bilateral negotiation? Do we have some regional negotiation? Do we do it in the WTO? Those are some of the questions we're going to have to figure out. These other Asian markets, this is the growth markets. These are growing economies, growing populations. They've got land constraints. They've got water constraints. Many of them are tropical producers. For the U.S., we're land extensive, right? We're temperate producers. We're great at row crops and deciduous fruit and livestock and processed products. So these markets should be very complementary to us. They need our products. We'd like to get trade agreements with them that remove barriers and make sure we're not being discriminated against. So these are priorities for us moving forward. Mexico, one of our closest markets, one of our top markets, the good news is that we've maintained our ability to sell in there at zero tariff. You can see 70% of Mexico's agricultural imports originate in the United States, and for soybeans, corn, we're supplying about 90% of that market. So thankfully, we've kept the NAFTA alive through the USMCA agreement. So we were looking at the potential of losing up to $10 billion a year in ag exports if NAFTA had been canceled. Instead, under USMCA, we're going to see some gradual increase in our ability to sell there, some quotas that are going to get us better dairy access into Canada, but more importantly, just keeping the market open. A lot of issues in Mexico. We're having to work to keep the market open, but so far so good. All right, so let me just finish up with this and say, as surplus producers, competitive producers, we are looking to compete in an environment that is open, predictable, transparent. So that we don't have government restrictions interfering with buyers and sellers deciding where and what kind of product they want to buy. That's why we value strong institutions that set up rules of the road that allow for everyday business to occur on a daily basis. We don't have the bandwidth to be running trade wars with the 20 countries that we export $1 billion or more to. And even when we do get into trade wars, they're difficult and the results are not always as much as we want. So what we're looking for here is a global system that is fair, that is open and predictable. And that's why we pay so much attention to WTO, to the Codex, where we set health and safety standards, and other international fora. We are looking to see what's going to happen with the WTO as we move forward, both as a place to set rules, but also to enforce them. U.S. agriculture has benefited from the WTO dispute process, where we've taken cases and got countries to change their policies. And so getting that back on track is going to be one of the things that we look at this year. And certainly we also value the WTO as a place to have broader global conversations about what is fair and what is unfair in trade. And that's going to be a big priority for us, I think, in agriculture. We are surplus producers. We want to see markets open. We do face barriers to our exports. There's pretty good consensus about an import ban or a tariff, and even on what an unfair subsidy might be. It's harder for us, though, to figure out how just national policy that might be a sovereign decision of a country on labor, environment, health and safety. And as the world talks about how are we going to organize trade, we're going to have more serious conversations about these matters, which are generally used to be maybe considered just sovereign issues. A country can set its own health and safety and labor and environment policy. But now these are global issues. There's more and more government policy being developed. It's having more and more effect on trade. How are we going to be involved in that conversation? That's a priority for us in agriculture. So I think my time is up, but thanks for giving me a chance to give you this brief talk.
Thank you, Jason, for sharing that message. We appreciate your service and all that you're doing in DC to benefit trade for U.S. soybean farmers. Trade is a critical part of the supply and demand picture, as we export roughly 60% of the U.S. soybean crop each year to buyers around the world. Through extensive market research and discovery, USEC and other U.S. soy partners have deployed strategies around the world to increase the use of U.S. soy in animal production. And today we've asked members of our global team to join us and share how they are shining a light on the newest science and data around soy, specifically that of U.S. soy. Following our discussion, you'll have the opportunity to participate in a live Q&A. If you are interested in learning more on this topic or others at hand, feel free to reach out to me or another member of the USEC team, and we are happy to discuss. And now I want to welcome Jim Sutter, who serves as the CEO of USEC, and he's going to help us understand the investment that USEC has made in research and tools to help buyers better understand the true value of U.S. soy. Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Monty, and welcome everyone. It's great to see all of you here with us today at the Commodity Classic and the learning session that the U.S. Soybean Export Council is hosting. My name is Jim Sutter, and I'm the CEO of the U.S. Soybean Export Council, and I'm really excited to talk with you today about the topic of how USEC does its job promoting U.S. soy around the world. And we're going to give you a little, some real good information and a snapshot into one part of how we do that. But first, let me just talk a bit about USEC's mission. The elevator speech that I use when I tell people about what USEC does is that our job is to differentiate and build a preference for U.S. soy, while also ensuring that we have market access around the world. You know, we have a team of well over 100 people who work full or part-time for U.S. soy in markets all around the world. Many of these people are truly experts in their field, and fortunately, you're going to get to meet some of them today. But so what we're trying to do, remember, differentiate and build a preference. And how are we differentiating? Well, we look at the intrinsic components of U.S. soy as well as the extrinsic components. Well, what do I mean by those? By intrinsic, we look at the component quality of the meal, the oil, and the overall quality aspects of U.S. soybeans, such as damage, moisture, those kind of things. but the things that are sort of inside the bean. We then look at the extrinsic factors, external factors like the reliability of the whole U.S. export supply chain and our country in terms of being an exporter to the world. Increasingly important as an extrinsic factor is the sustainable practices that U.S. farmers use as they produce soy. We sort of take that for granted here in the U.S., but it is a big deal overseas, and people really care about that. So we have a whole effort that we've made to be educating people about the sustainable practice, the sustainable way that U.S. soy is grown. But today, we're going to focus on the intrinsic components, and particularly on the nutritional aspects of the intrinsic components. For years, we've heard anecdotal evidence that U.S. soy is better than soy from other origins. We've heard the chickens know the difference, or the pigs know the difference. The animals can tell. We've heard that kind of thing. But when we're out doing marketing and when we're out talking to people around the world about why they should be buying U.S. soy, we need a little more information than just telling them that the chickens know or the pigs know better. So, what have we done? Well, people want data. And, our great team of nutritionists around the world have been working tirelessly to develop data that proves the superior quality of U.S. soy. We have a longtime partner and expert, Dr. Gonzalo Mateos, who's is a professor at the University of Madrid in Spain. He recently authored a meta-analysis that compared over 1,500 samples of soybean meal from the key origins around the world. These samples were analyzed and they were studied for many factors, crude protein being one of those, which is often a key way to compare soybeans or soybean meal between various samples and between various origins, as well as other factors. Now let me just comment about this crude protein measurement. And it's interesting that it uses the word crude protein. It really is a crude measurement because it doesn't get into the details. And nutritionists know very well about these new things. They're just more complicated as a way of measuring quality. They look at the amino acid levels, the energy levels, the carbohydrate levels, all the things that we all consider part of our nutritional diet, but also are very important for people who are producing livestock around the world. So our nutritionists have done a lot of work on that, and that all went into this meta-analysis that was done. The meta-analysis has a lot of value because it was peer-reviewed. What does that mean? It was reviewed by nutritional experts from around the world, and they all agreed with its contents. So then it was published in a scientific journal. The peer review process is a very critical part of that. So we got that done. And the data shows that the amino acid concentration and the energy levels in U.S. soy are superior to soy from other origins. This was not something that we're just saying, but the data and all of the scientific experts from around the world that reviewed it before it was published agree with that. So I think it's very important that you know that we're doing that kind of work to put together that kind of data. In addition, we have contracted with a company called Evonik. They're a very large nutritional ingredient supplier company to the world, but why we contracted with them is because they have probably the most extensive database of anybody worldwide in terms of the quality of feed ingredients. We're interested in soybean meal that are being used around the world. They use NIR technology, near-infrared technology, to analyze samples and keep updating their information real time. So we use that data to be able to show people about U.S. soy relative to soy from other origins. So we put all these things together, and then we have nutritional experts that will go out to people in the world. They'll educate people, they'll put on seminars, they will work one-on-one with customers and talk to them about the nutritional advantages of U.S. soy relative to other origins. Now, we are very lucky because we have one of those experts here with us today. And that happens to be Dr. Maria Mayorga. And Maria is coming to us. She's joining us actually from Colombia. She's in Medellin, Colombia. I think that's where she is today. And so we have an international team, and you'll meet people from the other side of the world in a little while, the rest of our presentation. But I'm going to introduce Dr. Maria Mayorga now. who is going to give us an overview, some of the more detailed information on how we use some of the things that I was just talking about. So Maria, I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Thank you so much, Jim, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. Today, we are going to present to you all why not all soybeans are created equal. So as Jim mentioned before, we have relied on peer-reviewed publications, and they're pretty useful because they have helped us to build a collective knowledge base. However, U.S.Ag acquired recently this Evonik database, which is pretty helpful because it's a very comprehensive snapshot of the quality of the soybean meal around the world, as well as the processing conditions. All the data is collected globally through the NIR machines, and all the information is sent via web browser. So the information is automatically processed and readily available to the customer. Here, we're able to compare different origins, different periods throughout the year, and obviously we got available a large database, which allows us to make comparisons between origins. Last year, some of our customers asked about something they were seeing about the protein content in soybean meal. Our customers told us that they noticed a decrease in crude protein content in 2020 compared to 2019. So we decided to use the Evonik database. And we saw actually that we were providing 12 more kcal in net energy for growing pigs and sows, which is pretty interesting because we found out that the composition between the soybean meal from the U.S. in 2020 and 2019 were different. In 2020, we got more total sugars and more starch, which are readily available energy source. Also, we got more sucrose in 2020 compared to 2019. Remember, sucrose is a disaccharide, highly digestible by monogastric species, and it's a source of energy. Additionally, we see differences between the amino acid profile in those years. In 2020, we saw that actually we were providing more lysine, methionine, cysteine, threonine, and valine, which is the most expensive amino acid in the formulation. So despite the decrease in crude protein we saw in 2020, we were providing more energy and obviously more amino acids for the animal to grow efficiently. And we took a closer look to the processing indicators, and we saw that in 2020, the trypsin inhibitors activity was reduced, which is pretty important because trypsin inhibitors affect heavily the digestion of the proteins we're providing through the diet. Also, we noticed that we had a higher level of reactive lysine, and that's pretty important because that indicates that the heat processing was pretty consistent and didn't affect the quality of those amino acids that are thermolabile, such as lysine and cysteine. Also, we wanted to compare different origins, and we saw a similar trend. We saw that the U.S. has a lower crude protein compared to Brazil and Bolivia. However, we also noticed that we got a different composition, and in this regard, we saw that we had a higher content of sugars than Brazil and Bolivia, and similar content than Argentina. So those values are reflected on sucrose content as well. Remember, sucrose is favored for climate, especially low temperatures. So the U.S. has classically exhibit higher levels of sucrose, which is a highly digestible carbohydrate. We also analyzed the amino acid profile of different origins, and we found out that we get advantages compared to Argentina and Bolivia. Sometimes this profile is highly dynamic, and sometimes we got advantages over other origins. And depending on the time of the year and the season, we are not able to detect those differences regarding relative abundance of amino acids. However, if we analyze the digestibility, which represents what is really available for the animal to grow and to absorb efficiently, we can see that U.S. exhibited higher levels of digestibility regarding essential and non-essential amino acids, which is really important currently. And if we saw the digestibility values for swine, we can see that U.S. Soybean meal exhibited higher lysine, cysteine, arginine, valine, isoleucine, serine, proline, and aspartic acid and glutamic acid levels compared to Argentina and Bolivia. Those amino acids are very important for intestinal integrity and intestinal health. Moreover, we analyzed the energy once again, this time through the equation from CVV, the Dutch energy system, which considers not only the levels of crude protein and either extract, which is crude fat, but also the coefficients of digestibility, which is how available are those nutrients for the animals, and also includes the sugar and starch fraction of the soybean meal. Using that prediction equation, we got that U.S. is providing more kcals per kilo of soybean meal than Argentina, Brazil, and Bolivia. That's very interesting because regardless of the protein content, we are providing more energy for the animal to grow and to maintain vital functions. Remember, energy cannot be manufactured, so we have to provide that through the diet. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much,
Yes.
Maria. That was great. I always love to hear you talk about all of the scientific aspects of U.S. soy. And I used the example earlier of crude protein being kind of an old simple measurement. The industry has certainly come a long way since that measurement was developed. But now think of all of the things that you're able to look at. And I think it is fantastic the way that you have all that data and you're able to present it in a way that someone who's not a nutritionist like me can still make some sense out of. So thank you very much for that. And that last thing that you talked about, the damage issue, I neglected to mention earlier that we've also done another study working with a leading global commodity analysis firm called IHS Markit to look at the various levels of damage and why this damage takes place. Because people oftentimes ask us, why are there differences? Why are the amino acids different? Why is there different levels of damage? And they've done some very interesting analysis showing the growing conditions in the different countries that you referred to. And I think that goes a long way towards explaining to people who are interested in the why are there differences? So we have that data that we can certainly share with people. But so we have all that great information that Maria presented, and there's a lot more of it behind that if people want to get into the details. But for some people, they are interested in the dollars and the cents. They want to know, what are the economics of all this? Sure, you've told me there are more kcals or there's more lysine, but how do you turn that into dollars and cents? And what does it mean for someone who is raising chickens or pigs somewhere around the world and is deciding which type of soybean meal to use? Well, we're so happy now to have a tool that helps people be able to answer that question. So USAC worked with a leading animal nutrition company called Genesis Feed Technology and to create something called the Nutrition Value Calculator. And it's a very elaborate tool that does feed formulation, and it allows whoever the feeder is, the person producing the feed or feeding the livestock, they can put their own formulation parameters in. They put their own data about the quality of the product. They put their own pricing information in, but then it gives them a financial result for what the dollars and cents impact of using one origin of soy versus another origin of soy. So for the first time, we really have a way to take this elaborate data that has been developed and tracked over years and then is updated for real time using the Evonik data and put that into dollars and cents. So people that are making everyday decisions about what to buy to feed their chickens or their pigs, they're able to see right in real time what's the dollar and cents impact. So I am so excited about this. I think it's just a great tool. And the really good thing about today is, through the wonders of technology, we have with us Matthew Clark, who is a principal in Genesis Feed Technology, and I think the developer behind the Nutrition Value Calculator, probably together with a partner of his. And so he is here all the way from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to talk to us about this. So although it's a different time of day where Matthew is versus where I am, it's typical for us. We work all around the world. Matthew does a lot of work with the animal industry, the livestock industry in Asia, particularly in Southeast Asia. But Matthew is here today to specifically talk with us about the nutrition value calculator and that sort of work. So I am going to turn it over right now to Matthew Clark. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Jim, for the introduction, and good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be sharing the work on the nutrition value calculator we've put together. We've been working with USAC on this for a little over 3 years now, putting our experience in the formulation sector, in the animal feed formulation sector, putting it to bear in how can we differentiate different soybean meals of different origins. And in our agenda today, I'm going to just run through at a high level what the nutrient calculator does for us. Soybeans and soybean meal vary around the world according to the country of origin. Now, what we're finding out, I live in Asia, so I work with some of the local crushers here, I work with some of the local importers. What we find is that increasingly that the farming is making a difference, and the quality of the US bean does stand out. And our job is to take some of these parameters that we can measure, simple things like color, the number of damaged kernels, and turn those into dollars and cents. And the best way we can do that in the world market is to teach people how to formulate diets effectively and differentiate different commodities. I'm sure you're aware with these very high commodity prices that people are looking for alternative ingredients. And we always say the alternative ingredient is a better soybean meal. That's the best one to go for to find the money. So what the nutrition value calculator does, it demonstrates the value of US soy products in practical diets. And as Jim has said, it is a formulation system that has been expanded to give commercial people a vision into the formulation process to make commercial decisions. So our platform expresses the technical side of soybeans in a very commercial language so that we can see what nutrients, what characteristics will make a difference to the profitability of the companies buying soybean meal. That is a very powerful reason to enable them to make a good choice. So let's look at the soybean. Well, it's like my grandchildren. The soybean is small and complicated. And we look at what's inside a soybean, and over all the years we've thought of soybeans as a protein source and an oil source. But it's more than that. And Jim, as you said, the crude protein test has been around a long time. It actually was invented in 1860. So this is a 160-year-old test that has been doing very well for us for a long time. But most of our soybean meal on the global scale is going into monogastric animals. And in the monogastric animals, we don't need crude protein as much as we need amino acids. And we need those amino acids to be digestible. Now, additionally, as Maria has pointed out, US soybean meal has a higher level of sucrose than most other destinations. And we need to build this into the profile. And we have some residual oil. So our challenge is to look at the full profile of the soybean meal, take account of every single component, and turn those technical details into a profit figure. So here is just a quick snapshot of the differences in the analysis. Now, if you look between, say, the crude protein levels, Argentina would have the lowest slightly, followed by the USA at 47.06, and then Brazil is up at 47.75. Well, it's not a big difference, but these small differences can make a big difference in the final profitability. And I draw your attention, please, to the central block of data there where it says CVB 2018. And this is the energy level within the different types of soybean meal as we've calculated in January, the January figures. And we can see that Argentina's got a little over 2,000 kilocalories, Brazil 2,052, and US 2,108. In fact, the US soybean meal is 5% higher in energy, more or less, compared to the Argentine soybean meal, and it's got about a 3% advantage over Brazil. Now, when I give this little talk, people say to me, Matthew, US soybean meal is a protein source. I say, aha, I know, but it also contains energy, and we have to bring that into account. So what kind of difference does it make? And the big test, as we understand it, is to put those candidate soybean meals into a commercial formula. And it's the formula cost that will tell us the value of the meals we're choosing. So these two formulas you see on the screen, there's a top left and there's a bottom right. Top left is formulated with Argentine soybean meal at $530 per ton. It's getting expensive in our part of the world. And you can see that the formula is using 29.49% soybean meal. Bottom right is the same formula specs in terms of nutrient composition, but it's using US soybean meal. And take a look at the difference. When we formulate with US soybean meal, we use less soybean meal. It's a higher quality product, and therefore we use less. So yes, it may cost more, and this is where we try to push the value up, but you use less of it. The value proposition is stronger. So the formula cost actually comes down by $7 a ton if I swap to US soybean meal at the same price. So we're getting a glimpse of where the value of changing source comes from. Purchasers in general are pretty resistant to a higher price. But when you show a general manager that their feed cost comes down if they spend a little more, they sit up and they take a look, and that's our job to point it out. Well, when we put this into the nutrient value calculator, we basically only have 3 operational screens for you to look at because we simplify the problem. We take, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4 different diets, and I've got a modest amount of feed here. I've got 5,000 plus tons of feed, a medium-sized broiler farm around our part of the world, and I'm looking at 3 different options of soybean meal to evaluate their impact on my enterprise cost. So the Argentine, you can see as we go down that SBM ARG column, we go down, and at the bottom we've got $2.110 million. That is my total cost of goods. Now, when I swap to using Brazilian soybean meal, my cost of goods will drop to $2.078 million. But when I swap to US soybean meal at the same price, down comes my cost again to $2.061 per month. $1 million per month. So there is quite a big shift in my expenditure in the business. And this is what we capture. We go from the technology that Maria has been talking about, we go through a commercial formulation system, and we present it in a profit and loss situation. So buyers can say, yes, this is where my money is being made by making this particular choice. And as we move on to the next screen, we show the usages of ingredients in different situations. And these tell a good story too. If we look at the soybean meal from Argentina, we will need 1,660 tons to make our feed. We'd start to use Brazilian meal and we will need less, 1,586 tons. We move to the US soybean meal, less still, 1,445 tons. So remember, we've said for a long time that soybean meals are not equal depending on where they come from. This means also, by implication, that we don't use the same quantity. So part of what we do as we talk about the cost of soybean meals or the price or the value of soybean meals in the international markets is to say, we don't compare ton per ton. They're quite different commodities. This is what you pay for this grade, and this is what you pay for this grade, and this is your bottom line. And as we use this tool, we are bringing formulation and purchasing and the USAC technology into the C-level within an organization to talk profitability. That's the connection we're making here. Now, if you look a little bit further down, you will see I've got the oil there. And as we use US soybean meal, we need less fat to support the production because US soybean meal has more energy. Using less fat means lower cost. And we look at the bottom line, corn. We use more corn to support the US meal than we do, say, the Argentina or Brazil. Again, we can see what are the components of the cost savings, and we can start to feel comfortable that these are realistic savings in our supply chain. We then look at the premium spread analysis, and this is where we show where the values are. Looking at the bottom line there, we've got US soybean meal, 48,930. That is the cost saving per month relative to an Argentine soybean meal supply, $48,930 per month. That's big money for a 5,000 ton business. If we take that number and we divide it by the number of tons, 1,445, we get this number on the right, which is 31.65. And that is the premium that we can pay for US soybean meal over and above the Argentine base. So we add the 31.65 onto the 520 comparison. US soybean meal in this enterprise evaluation using the nutrition technology, the formulation technology, and the commercial cost of goods analysis, we can say that US soybean meal is worth $551 per ton compared to Argentine at $520. And if I were to buy US soybean meal at $551.65 per ton and put it into the model, it will come out with an identical cost to Argentine soybean meal. It's that precise. It's a real number to us. So in conclusion, the nutrient value calculator is exciting. It uses the full nutrient profile in the evaluation. Every little detail that goes into a soybean in America is captured in this tool for promotional purposes. The way it works, we look for the lowest cost of goods in the feed mill. We are helping our customer seek profits. So the MVC will evaluate the economic contribution. All these candidate ingredients say, boom, that's the one you need to buy. So it's being used by quite a number of people. It's used by people who are purchasing to understand value. It's used by people who are showing the value to our prospective clients on a global scale. And we are really thrilled to be working with the U.S.Ag team on a global basis to show off how we can generate and understand the value of a better soybean meal.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew. You do a great job of taking a complex subject and turning it into something that again I can understand, and I know many people around the world can understand. I think it is such a great tool, and as you said, we take all the way from the quality of the soybean being farmed, all the analysis that Maria talked about, to then putting it into a dollar and cents formula that people who are feeding chickens, feeding pigs, trying to make money in their enterprise, that they can actually use. And I think it's such a great tool for them. And it is really a way that the investment of U.S. soy farmers through the checkoff and the USDA through the Foreign Ag Service, it's really teaming up to help promote our U.S. ag, U.S. soy in this case, but helping people around the world as we do that. Now, finally, to wrap up our conversation today, I am going to introduce the Vice Chairman of the U.S. Soybean Export Council's Board of Directors, a gentleman who is a farmer from Illinois, and he's also a representative on the United Soybean Board. I'm going to introduce him, and he's going to make some closing comments for us. Mr. Doug Winter. Please, Doug, take it away.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Jim, Maria, Matthew, thank you for sharing and shining a spotlight on the investments being made to differentiate U.S. soy on the international stage. Hello, everyone. My name is Doug Winter, and I serve as Vice Chairman of the U.S. Soybean Export Council and as a board member on the United Soybean Board, as Jim said. I'm coming to you from Mill Shoals, Illinois. That's in the southeastern part of the state. It's an honor to serve my fellow soybean farmers as a director on USEC and on USB. So many times I get questions on how our soybean dollars are spent and what work's being done with checkoff dollars and with USDA dollars that we use in research. Well, I'm not sure what funding source was provided for these particular areas, the pieces that we've had spotlighted today. I think it demonstrates that we have a fantastic team working in our behalf around the world with their boots on the ground and promoting U.S. soy all over the globe. And now we're able to say, backed by science, U.S. soy is the gold standard. But that's not it. We've got research, much more research and tools similar to the nutrient value calculator in the pipeline, and those will be released in the coming year as it relates to the refining value of U.S. soybean oil. Last of all, thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your attention and we appreciate your interest. We hope the presentations have been insightful, of value, and perhaps even inspiring as to the work we're doing and what's ahead. I also hope that this has piqued your curiosity about USEC's worldwide marketing efforts for U.S. soy. And we would love to hear from you.